Hello everyone, Mr. Ferrante here. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of our CNC router in the Woodshop. This machine allows us to accurately cut shapes, pockets, carvings, even text into wood using digital software design. This is not a qualification video and it is not a replacement for in-person instruction or my approval. The CNC is an advanced tool used to enhance woodworking projects, not replace fundamental woodworking skills. Before anyone uses this machine, you must complete the required safety training and follow shop expectations at all times. Alrighty, so this here is our CNC at the back of the Woodshop. You'll find the actual CNC router here. This is a Shapeoko 4 CNC router. And you'll find alongside it our computer that we actually use to upload our files and control the CNC machine. So what is a CNC router? A CNC router is a computer-controlled cutting machine. CNC stands for computer numerical control. The numerical means it runs off of numbers and coordinates based on X, Y, and Z axes. Instead of guiding the tool by hand, so we can use a hand router or even the table router, we create a design on a computer, and the machine follows a design using a spinning cutting bit, also known as a router bit. The CNC excels at repeating accurate shapes. It's fantastic for that. Cutting clean pockets and profiles, and as well as adding decorative details or even text. If you are interested in more information or a really good kind of general explanation of what the CNC router is, as well as certain things like operation safety, the software information, as well as things about the router bits, you can look at this poster right behind the CNC machine. It's very good. It kind of explains all those things I just mentioned, and you're more than welcome to read it. We'll probably have different variations that go up behind the CNC router here, but I do recommend giving it a read through. So as I mentioned earlier, the CNC router, although it is automated, it's not entirely risk-free. There are safety concerns as well as safety rules that go along with this machine. Some key safety rules include eye protection. You must wear eye protection at all times. Long hair must be tied back, and loose clothing, if you're wearing like a really long jacket, at least roll up the sleeves, but if it's something like a really big winter jacket, I would recommend just removing it. Hands must stay away from the cutting area while the machine is running. Never leave the CNC unattended while it is cutting, and know where the emergency stop button is at all times. We have an emergency stop button actually on the computer itself. There is also an off button that you can press right in front of the machine. If something sounds wrong, looks wrong, or doesn't feel right, we stop the machine immediately and get help. So I quickly wanted to talk about what happens if there was an emergency and you had to stop this machine. So I wanted to point out the two emergency stop buttons on this machine and also reference the two forms of power on this machine. So on the CNC router, there is one form of power. One is actually the travel of the machine. So you'll see that the router has these belts that kind of travel back and forth. This allows the arm here to go back and forth, allows the router itself to move left to right, and as well as this clamp around here, you can see the clamp that's holding onto the router, allows that to go up and down. So that's your X, Y, and Z axis. The other form of power on the CNC router is the router itself. So this here is your router. This is very similar. This is pretty much just a trim router. However, it is separately plugged in than the rest of the machine. So if you hit an emergency stop button, which I'll reference in a second, it won't turn off the router itself. The actual button to turn off the router is just right here on the side. All right. So that button right there will allow you to turn off the router and stop any sort of spinning of the router bit. Well, how do I actually stop the travel of the machine? Usually that is the main concern, especially if there's an emergency. If your piece isn't clamped down properly, if the bit shatters, anything of the sorts, it's very important to stop the motion of travel on the CNC router immediately. So you have two buttons. One here at the bottom, that is your blue button there. That button there will allow you to turn off the machine right away, but that is our regular on and off button. There's another button actually on the software itself. So this here is Carbide Motion. Carbide Motion allows us to connect to the machine, upload our files, and actually control the machine via computer. That button right there is our emergency stop button on the software. So you have a couple options, but just be aware that both the router itself and the CNC have two separate on and off buttons. All right. All right, so I wanted to talk about a basic workflow overview. Every CNC job follows pretty much the same basic workflow. First, you're going to want to design your part digitally. Second, you want to get approval before cutting. Third, you're going to want to prepare your material and secure it properly. Fourth, you want to set up the machine correctly. Fifth, run the cut actively while supervising the cut. You never want to walk away from it. And sixth, you want to make sure that you clean up and inspect the final result. Skipping steps or rushing usually leads to ruined material or even damaged tools. Going back to that first part that I talked about, so designing the part digitally, that's actually through our software called Carbide Create, which is free to download. Unfortunately, I've had some issues having it installed on this classroom laptops. So if it is available on the classroom laptop, you're more than welcome to use it. You don't have to sign up for anything. However, if you have your own laptop, you're more than welcome to download it. Just go to Carbide Create and download the version of either Windows or Mac that's suitable for your laptop. Carbide Create is a really user-friendly software. It's got a great user interface and it's quite easy to understand, especially the design stage. However, in a separate resource, you'll learn how to create designs using Carbide Create and prepare files for cutting. That booklet that I'll give you will walk you through things like file setup, toolpaths, exporting correctly, as well as things like this, which is simulation. Simulation is great because you can actually see how it's actually going to cut into your material. So that is a project that a student was working on and continues to work on, Strat guitar. And this was our test piece that I have over here. And you can see how in relation to the simulation, it's actually pretty spot on, except this material here is just a little bit larger. We set the stock size a little bit larger. Okay, and also you should always review those instructions carefully and ask questions before actually running a job. I want to walk you through a few parts that you're going to need to know about this machine, things like clamps, CNC bits, as well as any tools that you need to use to actually set up the machine. So obviously we know about the CNC router and the router itself. The router itself, you can actually see I took off the little dust sweeper on it, and there's that CNC bit right there. And here I'll actually zoom in a little bit more. There you go. So that's your CNC bit. That's actually a flat end mill bit. Very similar to any router, whether it's a hand router or a plunge router like the table routers. Same kind of system. It's got a collet, and you have to use 2 wrenches to loosen the nuts from the collet, and then the bit will drop out. Just be careful that the bit doesn't drop out right on top of your material. All right, that's the worst thing you want, is for that bit. It's very sharp, for it to drop onto a nice finished piece, and then all of a sudden you got a nice dent. Okay, so that is your router, and I'm talking about the bit itself. These are your clamps. So I have a couple options for clamps as of right now. I'll hopefully start to upgrade the clamping options. These red ones are new. These are actually metal clamps. These are really good for cutting larger material and clamping down larger material. You can see there's all these T-tracks on the actual bed of the CNC. That's where these bolts run through and allow us to clamp down our material. These green ones are made of plastic. These are really good for, I would be able to clamp that one down with these. However, I would probably recommend using these for smaller jobs. The reason that plastic is superior to metal clamps, in most cases, especially when CNCing, in my opinion, is that if there's a mistake, if something goes wrong, the clamp is holding down on the piece, and all of a sudden your bit is maybe cutting a little too far to the left, whoops, it's cut right through the clamp. It's going to react a lot better to cutting through plastic than it will cutting through metal. You won't get a damaged bit, you won't have metal shrapnel flying everywhere. I've already cut through a couple, or actually probably only one of these green clamps, and nothing really happened. So They're totally safe if for whatever reason, hopefully there are no mistakes, but if there is a mistake, it will cut through them and it's not the end of the world compared to these metal ones. Next, I wanted to talk about the actual CNC bits themselves. So I have a few different bits. As mentioned on this poster over here, you can actually see there's a little information about different types of bits. So the bits I have available here, the CNC router bits, include things like ball mills, end mills, which I just showed you, as well as V-bits. I have engraving bits, down cutter bits. So I continue to buy more and more. They have their different uses. In your Carbide Create package that I hope to give you in supplement to this video, we'll explain the differences and what their uses are, especially when thinking about creating a certain design. If I was creating and cutting out a guitar, I would probably use an end mill bit compared to if I was cutting out a sign, say I was putting my name on a sign, I would cut with a V-bit, all right? So all your bits are at your disposal here, but it's very important that you do not lose any of them. They have to go back into this tray or into its compatible little holder, all right? Next is obviously the computer itself. I'll give you the login information here. So that's the desktop, and you have your mouse and keyboard here. There is some more stuff over here. So that's that little dust boot that I removed from the router, as well as here's a couple wrenches that hang off on the side. These are for removing the bit from the collet. Sometimes it is a little difficult to cut a certain material all the way through, but we totally can. One thing you don't want to do is cut with a CNC bit, cut through a piece of wood and actually cut into the CNC table itself. This is a big no-no. One thing you can do is you can grab actually a big scrap piece of plywood like this one and use it as a sacrificial piece, very similar to what we do on the drill press. Then, if you need to, if clamps are insufficient, they don't really work, depending on the material you're cutting, you can actually use double-sided tape to hold down your material. So I have a roll of double-sided tape there. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot of parts to it, but it's very important that you understand the relation between each one and make sure you don't make a mistake where things start to get damaged. But that's pretty much the overview of tools you'll need, CNC bits, and clamps. The CNC router is one of the most powerful tools in our shop, not because it's fast or automated, but because it rewards planning, accuracy, and patience. When used properly, the CNC can elevate a project from good to professional even. When used carelessly, it wastes material, damages tooling, and creates unnecessary safety risks. Using the CNC is a privilege, especially in the woodshop here, not an automatic right. That privilege, like most machines, depends on following safety expectations at all times, preparing files and materials properly, taking time to check your setup before cutting, so do not rush through this, and staying with the machine for the entire job. The CNC will not fix poor design, rushed measurements, or last-minute decisions. If you rush the process, the machine will expose it. So your expectations going forward in Mr. Ferrante's woodshop is, if you want to use the CNC router, review the written CNC instructions carefully. That is something I'm going to provide you. Plan your design in advance using Carbide Create. Something else I'll provide you. Get teacher approval before turning the machine on. And ask questions early, not after something goes wrong. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative, and I'll see you in the next one.